Welcome to the Fright Files. Good evening. My name is Dr. Fright, along with Madam Mina, who will be joining us with a very scary story. Because tonight is a very special episode. You see, we have done 17 episodes of the Fright Files. And soon we are going to have a very special guest on our show very soon. Tonight, we would like to take a look back at 4 fan favorite stories from our past 17 episodes. And Madam Mina has a great story from one of her episodes as well. And with this being such a very special episode and very special night, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the fans of the Fright Files who have been with us on this journey as we scare the socks off of all who watch. And another special thanks to everybody who helps put this show together. With that being said, welcome to the Fright Files, episode 19. Welcome to the Fright Files special episode as we count down 4 of our best stories we have told in our 17 to 18 episodes up to this point. You have heard stories of the least frightful, ranging to the most frightful of them all. And tonight, along with Madam Mina, you will hear 4 of the best stories we have done so far. These stories left you in awe, frightful, scared, and maybe even crying. So hold on to your seats as we begin this journey. This first story came from one of our most famous episodes, I believe number 4, The Cursed Carnival. You see, Sam had always been the type of boy who crowd adventure. In the sleepy village where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen, he yearned for something more, something beyond the mundane routine of daily life. So when the traveling carnival rolled into town one foggy evening, its ghoulish lights flickering in the distance, Sam's curiosity got the better of him. The villagers were suspicious of the carnival, whispering among themselves that it was cursed, that those who entered never returned the same. Nah, you see, Sam dismissed their warnings as silly superstitions, too eager to experience the thrill of the unknown. That night, after his parents had gone to bed, Sam slipped out of the house and made his way towards the carnival. Yes, oh, the fog was thick, clinging to the ground like a living thing, and the furniture. And the further he went, the more the villages seemed to disappear behind him. The music from the carnival floated through the mist, eerie and distant, and the laughter of the few people that had an eager to it that made Sam's skins prickle. But he pressed on, his excitement outweighing the crowd growing unease in his gut. The fog was thick, clinging to the ground like a living thing. And you see, the further Sam went, the more the village seemed to disappear. Distant, distorted. As Sam reached the carnival, he noticed that something was off. The lights, which should have been bright and inviting, flickering weakly, weak, very weak, as though struggling to stay alive. The rides moved with a gazing slowness, creaking and groaning as if they were ancient, worn down by time. The workers, dressed in faded costumes, watched him with hollow eyes, their smiles plastered on their pale faces, but devoid of any warmth or joy. Despite the creeping sense of dread, Sam found himself drawn to a large tent at the center of the carnival. A sign above its entrance reading, "Enter if you dare." Without hesitation, Sam pushed outside the heavy canvas and stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the music outside cut off abruptly, leaving him in an eerie silence. The inside of the tent was dimly lit with only a few flickering candles, casting long, wearying shadows across the room. In the center of the tent stood a circle of mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of Sam. As he moved closer, Sam realized that the reflections were not simply showing his current self. They were showing what he could have been, what he might have become, if he had only made different choices in life. One mirror showed him as a successful businessman, dressed in a sharp suit with a confident smile. Another showed him as a renewed artist, his hands stained with paint and his eyes alive with passion. But there were darker reflections too, versions of himself twisted by anger, consumed by greed, or hollowed out by despair. Sam's heart raced as he turned from one mirror to the next, the images more vivid and real with each passing moment. Suddenly, the reflections began to move on their own, stepping out of the mirror and surrounding him. They closed in, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light, their faces twisted into cruel smiles. Panicking, panicking, Sam backed away, only to find that the tent walls had vanished, leaving him trapped in a maze of mirrors and endless reflections. Everywhere he looked, his own face stared back at him, each expression more sinister than the last. The carnival workers appeared around him, their gaunt faces illuminated by the flickering candles, their smiles now predatory. You must choose. You must choose, one of the workers said, his voice low and cold. Choose one. Choose one of their reflections to replace you in the real world. Choose one. Sam's mind raced as he tries to make sense of what's happening. He tries to make sense of what's happening. Was this some kind of a twisted game? But the worker's eyes bored into him, and he knew he had no choice. His gaze flickered from one reflection to another, searching for one that seemed most normal, the last dangerous. He knew he had no choice. His gazed face flickered from one reflection to another, searching for the one that made the most sense. Unfortunately, he spotted it, a version of himself that looked like him. No obvious distortion or twisted expressions. It was the closest thing to normal he could find. Taking a deep breath, Sam stepped towards the reflection, his hand outstretched. But as soon as his fingers brushed against the mirror surface, the reflection's face twisted in a grotesque grin. The grin widened, stretching unnaturally across its face as it reached out and grabbed Sam's wrist, pulling him into the mirror with a force that knocked the wind right out of him. Now you see the world around him spun and warped, closed around him, colors bleeding together in a nightmarish blur. When the spinning stopped, Sam forced himself and found himself in a twisted version of the carnival, where everything was wrong. The lights were dark and flickering. The rides creaked and groaned like the dying, and the workers' faces were now hideous, distorted marks of their former selves. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sounds of laughter had turned to walls of despair. Sam pounded on the mirror surface, trying to break free, but it was like striking solid stone. On the other side, his reflection, now no longer just a reflection, stepped out into the real world, stretching and flickering its limbs as if it had just awoken from a long sleep. It turned to look at Sam, its grin now a full mocking sneer, before it walked away, leaving Sam trapped in the nightmarish carnival. The next morning, the villagers awoke to find Carnival gone, leaving behind no trace except the eerie silence that had lingered in the air. Sam's parents soon noticed that their son wasn't quite the same. He seemed colder, more distant, with a strange glint in his eye, and they couldn't quite place it. But by then it was too late to do anything about it. The real Sam was lost forever in the cursed carnival, trapped in a twisted world where reality and nightmares were on the same scene. And as the cursed carnival moved to its next destination, it carried with it the echoes of the souls it had claimed, leaving only darkness and despair in its wake. The real Sam was forever in the cursed carnival. And as the carnival moves on to its next city, its next town, who will be its next victim? And will you visit the cursed carnival? Thank you for listening to that frightful story. And thank you for making that story one of the most popular stories we have told here on the Fright Files. Madam Mina will be joining us here shortly. Let's take an opportunity and thank all of those in the chat room. And don't forget to double tap, like, and share, and be a member of the Fright Files so you know when the next frightful episode is coming. Thank you for saying I'm a great storyteller. If you can make it till the end, you will know how Dr. Fright likes to tell. Sometimes even the most frightful stories for the very last. And as we count down our 4 most frightful tales of all the past 17, 18 episodes, I bring you our next tale. This story is called The Well. You see, in the heart of a small, isolated village stood an ancient well, its stone walls worn smooth by centuries of use. The well was the village's lifeblood, providing water for the drinking, cooking, and washing. But it was more than just a source of water. It was the center of a dark legend that the villagers spoke of only in hushed tones. A tale passed down through generations. The legend told of a creature that lived at the bottom of the well, a monstrous being that fed on the souls of those who dared to draw water after dark. The villagers took the legend seriously, for there had been disappearances over the years. People who had ventured to the well after sunset and were never seen again. I repeat, they were never seen again. The well was always sealed at dusk, its heavy wooden lid firmly in place, and no one was allowed to approach it until the sun rose again. But as with all legends, there were those who didn't believe, who dismissed the stories as nothing more than old superstitions. And then it happened. You see, Jacob was one of those people, a stubborn, headstrong boy of 15. He scoffed at the idea of a creature living in the well. He had drowned water from it countless times, and nothing had ever happened. Never. The warnings were nothing but the ramblings of old men and women clinging to the past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village settled into the quiet of the night, Jacob's mother asked him to fetch water from the well. She had been busy all day and there was no water left for the evening meal. Jacob hesitated for a moment, glancing out of the window at the gathering darkness. But then he shrugged off his unease. The well was just a well, and he wasn't afraid of some made up creature. Grabbing the empty jug, Jacob headed out into the cool evening air. The village was silent, the only sound the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. The sky was a deep purple, that last of rays of sunlight fading as stars began to twinkle. The well stood at the center of the village, its old stories glowing faintly in the dim light. As Jacob approached, he felt a slight chill, but he ignored that, focusing instead on the task at hand. He set the jug down beside the well and lifted the heavy wooden lid, grunting with effort. The air inside the well was cool and damp, carrying the faint earthly scent of wet stone. Jacob tired. Jacob tied the bucket to the rope and lowered it into the well, listening to the creak of the rope as it descended into the darkness. The bucket hit the water with a splash, and Jacob began to crank it up. His thoughts were wandering as he worked, but as the bucket neared the top, he heard something faint, almost impressible. But there was a low, gurgling sound, like the bubbling of water deep below. Jacob paused, frowning, but then he stood up, his head raised high. It was probably just the water echoing off the walls of the well. He pulled the bucket up the rest of the way and filled it in his jug, and as he leaned over to close the lid, he caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness below. His heart skipped a beat, and he leaned closer, peering down into the well. The water calm, reflecting the stars overhead. But as he watched, ripples began to spread across the surface. Something was moving down there, something large and slowly rising. I hope you enjoy that story of the well. I want to thank everybody here in the chat room and everybody watching all over. As tonight's episode, we count down 4 of our best stories from all past 17, 18 episodes, which brings us to Madam Mina, who is somewhere in the depths of hell, waiting to tell her frightful tale. Madam Mina, can you hear me?
I have a quick one for you.
Good.
I posted one on another thread, but it was so long ago, I didn't want to hijack the comments section of a good story. I am dying Navajo. And boy, have I heard a lot of stories growing up on the reservation. While I never seen anything myself, which I am grateful for, I have benefited by being around the people who have. There is a different kind of evil that exists in the quiet high deserts and deep sandstone canyons of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, even Colorado, in the southern Ute area. I can only describe it as an ancient evil now. There are helpful ceremonies, rituals, and traditions that are still practiced to this day. Heck, even a local hospital has an on-duty medicine man, but it seems to be a double-edged sword. What I mean is that there is also black magic, which most Dine will not even acknowledge or speak of. We are very superstitious and are heavy with taboos. You will find this with most First Nation people from Alaska to Argentina. It's just something you don't do in fear that it will get the attention of unwanted spirits or harmful beings. Skinwalkers or Naldelushi are just a few stories that keep me up at night with the covers over my head. Here's a quick one for you guys. A Navajo tribal police officer was driving west on what used to be officially named Highway 666. It was lightly snowing, maybe a fourth of an inch, which is a lot of snow for home. And he sees an old woman walking on the side of the road. How she got there or where she was going was not apparent because she was so far out in the middle of nowhere. He didn't see her right away, but as he passes, he noticed that she is dressed in traditional clothing, a shawl, dress, moccasins, and her hair in the traditional bun. Not too odd, but many elders still choose to dress traditionally. But why was she out in such cold weather this late at night? Hitchhiking, maybe. to be seen. This is a fairly flat terrain, and he for sure saw an old woman walking. He pulls the squad car over and steps out with his flashlight. Confused, he manages to find the woman's footsteps in the shallow snow. He follows the footsteps until they suddenly turn into what look like dog footprints leading away from the road in a hurry. He immediately jumps back into the squad car and meets up with another officer near his patrol. He is a little shaken up, but asks the other officer if he has ever seen anything like that. The officer tells him that he has. He also explains that sometimes it's an old woman, sometimes a very beautiful young girl, but always on the side, always on that road, and always in the snow, waiting for the right good Samaritan to let her in their car. I still get nervous driving those wide open spaces at night. I keep my eyes strictly on the road and turn my music up high. I rarely pick up hitchhikers, but I never pick them up at night. Ooh, that was a spooky one.
Thank you very much, Madam Mina, for that frightful story. We'll be right back with 2 more stories for you. Hang on to your seats, and even Madam Mina will be back here for another story as well. All right, welcome back to our special edition of the Fright Files as we talk about 4 of our most favorite stories that we have told on our 17, 18 episodes. And soon, as I stated, we will be having a special guest coming up on the 20th of February. So stay with us. That will be a frightful episode. And we just heard from Madam Mina, who was in the depths of hell and came up to tell us one frightful story. Unfortunately, she was not showing her face due to the fact that that story was so frightful. Even I wouldn't want to show myself, but that's no problem because we have 2 more stories here tonight. And this story, you may want to hide under the covers. You may want to hide in the closet. You may want to be very careful what you are doing because this story came from one of our first episodes. It is called The Spider's Lair. And this story to this day can still give many a nightmares. I want to say hello to everybody in the chat room again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being fans of the Fright Files. And as we dive deep into the depths of hell for this next story, fans voted this story as one of their most favorite stories of all time. You see, in the secluded village of Duskmire, nestled at the edge of a vast and ancient forest, there exists a chilling tale, passed down through generations. The story spoke of a monstrous spider that lurked deep within the woods, weaving its massive webs between the trees. The villagers claimed the spiders lured its unsuspecting souls into its lair with promises of unimaginable treasures, only to ensure them that its deadly web and drain them of their blood. Once it ensnared them in its web, it would drain all their blood, leaving them to the brink of death. Now, most villagers avoided the forest, but there were always those who believed they could outsmart the ancient creature. Clara, a determined and fearless girl, had heard the tales of the spider since she was a child. Her family was struggling. Her father, once a proud farmer, was now too sick to work, and their crops had failed for the third year in a row. Desperation gnawed at Clara's heart as she watched her mother fret over their dwindling supplies. The promise of treasures hidden deep within the forest, way too tempting to ignore. It could have been the answer to their prayers, the solution her family desperately needed. Armed with nothing but a flickering lantern and her father's old hunting knife, Clara made her mind up to venture into the forest. She was determined to find the spider's lair, retrieve the treasure, and return before dawn. As she entered the woods, the air grew colder. The trees seemed to close in around her, the gnarled branches twinkling like the fingers of some ancient malevolent entity. The deeper Clara ventured, the darker the forest becomes. The light from her lantern struggles to penetrate to the thick cloud, to the ground like a shroud. Every rustle in the unbrushed, every snap of a twig sent a shiver down her spine. But she pressed on, driven by the thought of her family's suffering. The stories of the spider's victims whispered in the back of her mind, but she pushed them aside, focusing on what mattered most, or I should say the task at hand. After what felt like hours of walking, Clara finally stumbled upon a clearing. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting an eerie glow on the scene before her. There, between two towering trees, was the spider's web, a massive intrusive structure that glistened like a silver in the moonlight. The web was wide as a house, its threads thick and sticky, stretching from one tree to the other. At the center of the web lay a pale pile of bones and tattered clothing, the grim remains of the spider's previous victims. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she approached the web, her lantern casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she steeled herself, determined to find the treasures that the stories had promised. Just as she took another step forward, the ground beneath her feet suddenly gave way. Clara screamed as she plummeted into the hidden pit, her lantern slipping from the grasp and shattering on the ground below. She landed for a thud. She landed with a thud. The wind knocked out of her as she found herself tangled in the sticky, suffocating web. The more she struggled, the tighter the web became, wrapping around her limbs and chest like a constricting snake. Panic surged through her as she realized the truth. There was no treasure, only a trap set by the monstrous spider to lure its prey. From the shadows, the spider emerged, its massive, heavy legs clicking against the ground, as it approached its body, the size of a horse, covered in thick black bristle, and its eyes, 8 gleaming orbs, reflected the dim light of the moon. The spider's fangs, sharp and glistening with venom, protruded from its grotesque mouth as it slowly descended upon Clara's hunger. As it slowly descended, Clara's hunger, her burning eyes, it came closer and closer and closer. Clara's mind raced as the spider loomed over her, its fangs itching from her face. In a last desperate effort, she reached for her father's knife, her fingers flubbing to free it from the sheath of the wrist. She reached for the knife, her fingers fumbling to free it from the sheath of her waist. With a fierce cry, she plunged the blade into the spider's soft underbelly. The creature let out a deafening screech, its legs failing as it recoiled in pain. Blood oozed from the wound, dripping into the web below. The spider retreated into the shadows, its screeches echoing through the forest as it disappeared from sight. For a moment, Clara thought she had won, that she had driven the creatures away. But as she lay there tangled in the web, she realized the horrifying truth. She was too weak to free herself, and the spider was merely waiting for its prey to succumb to exhaustion. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound the faint rustling of the web as it tightened around her. Clara's strength embedded away with each passing minute, her vision growing dim as the cold air settled over her. The stories had been true. There was no treasure, only a deadly snare that had claimed countless lives before hers. As the first light of dawn began to creak over the horizon, Clara's breath grew shallow. She knew she wouldn't last much longer. The last thing she saw before darkness claiming her was the glimmer of the spider's eye watching her from the shadows, waiting patiently for her to succumb. The force would soon claim another victim, and the web would be ready for the next unfortunate soul drawn by the promise of riches. I hope you enjoy that story of the web. This has been a frightful 17 to 18 episodes. And before we leave you tonight, we have one more frightful tale. You have heard from Madam Mina. You have heard of the spider's web. You also heard of the well and the cursed carnival. And now we bring you to our final story of the night. And again, thanks to everybody who's in the chat saying hi to all of us. And thank you to everybody watching around the world, wherever you are. Like and subscribe, and tell us in the chat where you're located. We would love to hear from you, as we have Fright fans from all over the globe. Which brings us now to our final story of the evening. Of all the stories we have told up to this point, this was voted the number one frightful tale. We end tonight's Fright Files with the most haunting tale of the evening. The Feast of Shadows. In a wealthy suburb where every house is meticulously maintained and every lawn perfectly trimmed, there is a single mansion that stands apart, a grand old estate surrounded by towering oaks. Its windows dark and uninviting. The mansion is owned by the eccentric Morton family, who throw an elaborate dinner party once a year on Halloween night. The invitations are highly coveted, but it's said that those who attend the dinner never return the same. Ethan, a journalist for a local magazine, receives a last minute invitation to the Morton family's Halloween dinner. He's heard the rumors, the whispers about the strange events that take place in the mansion, but he's always dismissed them as idle gossip. Still, the opportunity to write an expose on the mysterious mansion is too good to pass up, so he accepts the invitation, eager to uncover the truth the night of the dinner. The night of the dinner, Ethan arrives at the mansion, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The mansion is even more imposing up close, its Gothic architecture looming over him like a dark cloud. The doors swing open as he approaches, revealing a grand foyer lit by flickering candles. A butler greets him, his expression unreadable as he takes Ethan's coat and leads him into their dining room. The room is filled with guests, all dressed in extravagant costumes, their faces hidden behind masks. Their air, the air is thick with a scent of roasted meat and fine wine. Now the table is laden with silver platters and crystal goblets. Ethan takes his seat, trying to make small talk with the guest, but there is something off about them. Their laughter is too loud, their smiles too wide, and their eyes gleam with an unnatural light. The diner begins, the dinner begins, and Ethan is served course after course after course of the most exquisite food he's ever tasted. The wine flows freely, and soon the guests are laughing and toasting, their masks slipping slightly as the night wears on. But as the clock strikes midnight, the mood shifts, the laughter dies down, and the candles flicker, and the butter butler reappears, wheeling in a massive covered platter. The platter is placed at the head of the table, where the Mortons sits. He rises from his chair, his mask glistening in the candlelight, as he addresses the guest. His voice is deep and resonant, filled with authority, and something darker, something more that makes Ethan's skin crawl. Mr. Morton speaks of tradition, of the importance of the feast, and how the horror is to be part of such an externally exquisite evening. With a flourish, Mr. Morton removes the cover from the platter, revealing a most A roast unlike any other Ethan has ever tasted. The meat is dark and glistening, its surface carved with strange symbols. The guests murmur its approval, their eyes fixed with the dish, with a hunger that borders on Ethan, with a hunger that borders on Pharaoh. And Ethan feels a wave of nausea as he realizes that the roast isn't from any animal he knows. It's something else, something far more sinister. You see the guests begin to eat, their movement frenzied as they tear into the meat with their bare hands. Ethan tries to push his chair back to leave, but his body won't obey. He watches in horror as the guests' faces change, their skin growing and pale, their eyes sinking into the skulls. They look like walking corpses, their mouths smeared with blood and grease as they devour the feast. Mr. Morton turns to Ethan, his mask slipping to reveal a face that barely looks human. His skin is gray and stretched tight over his skull, his eyes sunken and gleaming with a malevolent light. He smiles, revealing teeth that aren't too sharp, too many. Welcome to the family, Ethan, he says, his voice dripping with dark amusement. We've been waiting for you. Ethan feels a cold dread wash over him as he realizes the true purpose of the dinner. This isn't just a meal. No, 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 no. It's a ritual, a cemetery to a dark ceremony to bind the guests to the Mortons forever. The food they've been eating is not from beasts. It's the flesh of previous guests, cursed to walk the earth as the living dead burn to the Morton's will. Ethan struggles to resist, but the food he's consumed is already working. It's dark magic. His limbs grow heavy, his thoughts sluggish, as the curse takes its place and takes hold of Ethan. Ethan can barely speak, his words are now sputtering. He looks down at his hands, horrified to see the skin turning gray, his fingers crawling into the claws. The other guests turn to him, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, welcoming him to their cursed ranks. Mr. Morton raises his glass in a final toast, his eyes gleaming with triumph. To the feast that never ends. To the feast that never ends, he declares, and the guests each echo his words. The feast that never ends, their voices hollow and lifeless. Ethan's vision blurs, and the last thing he sees before the darkness claims him, it is the face of the other guest, their eyes gleaming with some malevolent light that now burns within him. The next morning, the mansion is quiet, its doors closed and windows dark. The villagers go about their day, unaware of the horror that unfolds within the walls of the old estate. But when Halloween night comes again, the Mortons will host another feast, and another guest will join the cursed ranks, doomed to serve family for all eternity. I hope you enjoy that most frightful tale, The Feast of Shadows. My name is Chris Harmon. You have been watching Dr. Fright. and the Fright Files. Once a week, Dr. Fright goes from mild-mannered Chris Harmon to the Fright Files of the depths of the unknown and tells stories only told by the great Dr. Fright. And I want to thank everybody who came here tonight and saw all 4 frightful tales from our past 17 episodes. These were some of the best handpicked. I want to thank everybody in the chat room. And I want to thank Madam Mina for allowing her voice to be heard to tell us such a wonderful tale. And stay tuned as we have a special guest coming on the Fright Files really soon, on the 20th of February. And folks, it is now time for Dr. Fright to join Madam Mina in the depths of hell for resting. We hope you will return next week for another round of the Fright Files. Plus, our special guest will be here to join us, as well as Madam Mina in person. From Chris Harmon, Dr. Fright, and Madam Mina, I want to say thank you to everybody who came here. Thank you for being a fan of the Fright Files.